All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. My name is Jeff, also known as the Revit Kid. Sorry, I just had the music very loud there. This is episode 89 of BIM After Dark Live. I'm super excited. I have a new guest on the show coming up, and I'm super excited to introduce her in a few minutes. And we're going to be talking about schedules and lots of really cool things when it comes to schedules. Not just creating them, but some more advanced techniques as well. Let me know if the audio sounds okay, guys, because my levels here are showing some crazy stuff. So if it sounds like I'm screaming at you, I apologize, but I think we're okay now. So anyways, thanks for joining the show. If this is your first time here, this is a weekly live stream where we talk about Revit, BIM, and all kinds of adjacent software technologies and so on. And for those of you here live, I will be checking out the chat. So definitely ask questions and converse as we go through this stream, and I will feed them into our guest as we go along or into the conversation. It's always a lot of fun to hang out with you guys in the chat as we're going through this. It's part of the nice things about doing this live. Additionally, if you enjoy this content and this show, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got 89 episodes of the live stream, so you've got all of those you can go back and check. You can also head on over to live.bimafterdark.com to check out all 88 episodes up to date, and also lots of other content on the channel, so make sure you subscribe. And I've got more planned content coming up. So with all that being said, before we introduce our guest, I did want to take a moment to mention that this episode of BIM After Dark Live is brought to you by the BIM After Dark community. For those of you that don't know what the BIM After Dark community is, it is a private community here on the interwebs where you can connect with not only me, but also other Revit users and go through course content as well as a live community social feed here. So I'm going to show you quickly what this kind of looks like on the inside. We've got 4 full-on courses that you can take any of the content from the courses. BIM can be sexy about presentation techniques. BIM can make paper about documentation with sample files, of course. And each course also has a community feed where you can ask questions and go through the content as well. Additionally, we also have office hours. And so we actually had one earlier today where we talked about site planning and some interesting, unique ideas for creating multi-housing developments and so on and so forth. And we've had over 58 of those. And office hour is basically a live Zoom call with myself and other members in which we just talk about whatever's on your mind for an hour and try to answer your questions and so on and so forth. And last but not least, we also have sample files within this community. So for example, if you guys enjoyed the Modern Kitchen Renovation series, those who are members actually get that file. So if you enjoy your favorite tutorials from the Revit Kid and from this channel, then you actually will be able to download those sample files as we go along. So if you're interested, I am holding a sale from now until the end of the season, which will be a couple weeks away, December 22nd. And you can take advantage of that by heading on over to community.bimafterdark.com. So definitely check that out. I promise you will not be disappointed. So I'm just checking out before we introduce our guests. We've got some returning folks. We got Shane is here. Stan, how's it going, guys? I know some of you guys over in Australia and New Zealand might not have been able to watch it last week live because we were at a unique time. Welcome back. And for those of you in Europe who are now watching this tomorrow, probably, I apologize that we didn't have a good time for you again live, but here it is. So with all that being said, I am going to introduce our guest. Let me make sure your audio is there. Purvi, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Hey, hi Jeff. So glad to be here. This is very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. I've been wanting to get you on for a while, and I'm glad it finally worked out. I know you've been moving around and doing a couple things, so we finally found a good date and time that works for you. For Purvi, she's actually over in Bangladesh, right? I believe.
Yep,
so it's Friday morning for you. So happy Friday to you, and it's Thursday night for me. But welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. I watched your show a lot. It was a fun thing to do during COVID on Thursday evenings and hang out with everybody. So I'm glad to be here. Do you want me to do a little intro about
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's
do it. For those of you that don't know who Purvi is, I'll let her introduce herself to all of you.
Yeah. So if you don't know me, hi, I'm Purvi. I'm currently a BIM technology consultant. I am also an architect. My formal training is in architecture and historic preservation, and I practiced that for about 10 years before I jumped over to the consulting side. And I've been doing that for a while. Back in the U.S., I worked for an Autodesk reseller, and then when I moved here to Bangladesh, I moved with my husband, who became an American diplomat. So we are all here now, and that's why I started my own little consulting company, and I'm doing the same thing, supporting people with their Revit needs, making content, doing troubleshooting. I can do project assistance, teaching, kind of anything and everything related to Revit. So I've been using it since 2008. I have a special place in my heart for schedules, which is why when Jeff one, I was like, this is my favorite one. And so I was very excited to do an update, because I did it at Built back in like 2018 in North America, and a lot of stuff changed in 22, as I'm sure most of you are aware. So I had to completely revamp the whole thing and take out all these things that were no longer valid and show all these other new things. And so I'm very excited to show you all some of the new things that came about in 22 and 23.
Awesome. Yes, and so the name of Purvi's company is Shifted Paradigm Design, and I'll put links to be able to get. And she's at BIMChick with a Q, which I'll also put a link to that on Twitter. And Purvi's always been pretty active on Twitter, so you can definitely reach out to her on that. And so, and again, guys, make sure you ask questions in the chat as we go along. But when Purvi first reached out, we were trying to sort of figure out a topic and how we wanted to address this. I was actually super interested in when I was reading through your handout for Built, was actually less the advanced stuff, which we're definitely going to get into, but actually more of the introduction or 101 stuff on schedules, because I do think that there's and what Purvi and I were talking about before we jumped on is as users of the program since 2008, and I actually started around the same time too, we take it for granted, I think, the sort of beginnings of when we were learning it, and we can, when we're teaching others, sometimes we can forget some of these things. And so when I was reading through the handout, you had a great section on sort of setting up schedules, different graphic ideas and coloring and headers and all that stuff, as well as some different parameters and properties that you can set up. And so I actually thought that that's a good place to start, and I was super excited because I think there's a lot of folks in the audience that will benefit from us just not jumping right into super advanced schedule techniques and actually going through maybe some stuff that they didn't even realize they could do when creating the schedules initially. So with that, I think we can probably just jump right into it and maybe run through some intro sort of content about maybe schedule types or how to create schedules, and then we can jump into some of the graphics and some of the cool stuff like that.
Definitely, yeah. Let me know when my screen's shared, and I can get started. We'll do all live Revit demo. It's my
Let's
favorite
do it.
thing. I like to live on the edge.
That's right. We're going to live on the edge. That's how we do this here. Yep, they're seeing you and your screen, so we can jump right in.
All right. So I'm showing everything in 23 so that I have the newest features. I did not install the update. I wasn't going to do it right before Built, and then I just forgot. So it's not the .1 update that came out a couple weeks ago. It's just the original build of 23. But just to give you basic rundown, right? So when you want to make a new schedule, right, we go to the View tab, we go to Schedules. Now, as an architect, the types of schedules that I use the most, schedule quantities, right, scheduling kind of any object in your model. I also use the sheet list, I use the view list, and I use note blocks a lot. I actually did a whole presentation on generic annotations and note blocks at Built ANZ also. And we'll run through those a little bit if we have, I think we'll see how it goes throughout the session. But to make a schedule, right, we just go to schedule quantities here, and then you're going to pick the category that you want. So just for fun, let's do rooms. Rooms are a nice one, right? Make a room. I have a bunch of weird phases in here. We're just going to make a schedule, right? Making a schedule, hopefully most of you on this call kind of understand these basics. You have the schedule over here. You have all of your parameters. Now, something cool that got added, I think in 21 or 22, was some of the stuff up here at the top. So I don't know if you all are working in 22 or 23 and you've seen these things, but it's awesome because now you can search for your parameters. You guys, anybody played with this, it's great. You can look at your parameters based off of like what type they are. This is like mind blowing, right? Like I want to just see my family parameters. I want to just see my shared parameters. You can sort them. You can sort them by disciplines. You can, all sorts of cool things. You can just search. So if you have, a bajillion parameters, like a lot of us do, you can use this up here to help you search for the ones that you want. So that's pretty cool. Like, because I have a bunch of, shared parameters in here because I was showing how to put shared parameters in key schedules. That's a new thing, which is amazing and awesome, that I'll show you too. So basically, to make the schedule, you go over here and you add it. Now, when I add my parameters, I like to add them in the order that I want to see them across. Just makes it easier for me to think about how I want my schedule. Because for the most part, you know what order you want things in your schedule, right? So I always, for something like rooms, I'll always put the level first. Double click on it, it'll add it over to the other side. Or, you can click on it and you can hit this little arrow. Double clicking is a little faster, saves you a millisecond. Those add up, of course, right? So number, name, you might want to have some finishes. Here's my wall finish. I might want to have ones for like each of the walls. These were my shared parameters that I was playing with. I might have a floor finish. You just add all of these things, the base finish, the ceiling finish, not that one. And then maybe comments, because we always like to have comments at the end of our schedule, right? For whatever reason.
Of course.
So that's what you get. And then when I say okay, I just get this. Revit likes to default to making all of your columns like an inch wide, which is pretty cool. I think this file is actually in metric since I was giving it at build A and Z, but we could probably, I should probably switch it back. We could take a sidebar and for those of you who don't know how to switch your units, manage project units right here. And I'm going to change this back to inches so that we don't confuse anybody. Do the same thing for area, change it back to square feet. Okay. So now, if we need to, it'll be good. So okay, so this is just what it looks like, right? But now we're going to go over here into the properties, and we have all of these edit buttons that take us back to this window. Filter, if you need to filter it for any reason, you can do that here. Sorting and grouping. So this is where you really want to think about how do I want to organize my data. So I usually will do it by level. Okay, and I want to put a little header, right? So you add a little header row in between each one. And then typically for a room schedule, I'll go number next. And that's usually about it. I want to itemize every instance so that I can see every room on my list. So I might just do that. And you can see that it added this little header. Zoom in a little bit. You can see that. You can see this. Now, I know, so let's say now we want to think about how do I want to make it so other people can understand what the schedule is for. And this is where I like to use color. So for any parameter that I'm using for sorting or grouping, I usually will make it a color. So to make it a color, you just click on the header, and then you go over here to shading, which is in your Modify Schedule Quantities tab. You just pick a color. Now, this is funny, but I usually just pick this color because it's the top left color and it's ugly and nobody likes it. And so you're like, I don't want to see this color on my drawing, so you'll know that I'm not supposed to actually see this column. So I picked that one.
So one day when they finally change those swatches, it's going to screw you up big time.
Yep, I know.
Although swatches have been the same for like 15 years, but one day they're just going to add a new Pantone on the top, and you're gonna get all screwed.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, it is what it is. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I actually want to show you how to group parameters together, because I know sometimes you may want to have like a little subheader, like for example, these four right here, right? These are all wall finishes, and I may want to have it above, say, wall finishes, right? So what you have to do, it's a little tricky sometimes. You have to make sure you're not actually clicked in the one you want to start with. And then you click and drag across, and then you do this little group up here. And it kind of adds this up here, and you can just call it, wall. And then let's say that I want to group all of the finishes together like that. You can highlight all of those and do group and call this one finishes. right? This is just a very simple way to try to make Revit look as much like Excel as possible, even though it doesn't really want to. I've figured out a lot of tricks over time to try to make it look as pretty as you can because, we're all used to Excel and being able to make it look however we want. And so Revit's getting there. They've added a few more things, but this is kind of the best we can get in terms of that sort of thing.
Well, that's awesome. I think just no, other than I had the top of your screen cut off, but I fixed that. It didn't look like it for a second, but so no, that's huge. I mean, I think even just the shading part, I think a lot of people probably haven't even noticed that button exists. Being able to select a column and shade it, right? And then the grouping as well. I mean, that's when you see Excel or when you see schedules, you think of Excel and you're like, well, how do I do the same thing if I wanted to group these? And so that's a great tip there, is especially clicking off of it and dragging across. I think that'll probably help people.
I know, it's just those weird little quirks, that I try to show. I used to teach, Revit level 1 classes at my old job. And so I would try to think of the things that are just like super frustrating for users that are like, sort of don't make any sense, but it's just because Revit sort of, it's just the way the software is, and you just have to accept it and move on, right? So yeah.
So I think probably one thing I think about now that you're going through it that's probably useful for some folks is maybe talking a little bit about how what you're doing here affects when the schedule's on a sheet, because I think that trips people up sometimes. It's closer than it used to be, but there's you kind of got to understand the differences between the schedule view and the sheet view, I think, to some extent, at least understanding how those relate.
Good point. All right. Well, then what we're going to do is we're going to take this schedule. I'm just going to put it on the sheet. So I have the sheet that I, used for how I help organize our presentation. I'm just going to drag it up here. You can see it. So you can see, right, that you see that color on the sheet. Now, one thing that I kind of wish Revit had was a kind of working view and then the sheet view just in one schedule, but it doesn't. And so actually, this is a good sidebar into that, in that I always have a working version and a sheet version of every one of my schedules, because I'm going to show you, I have these other ones over here that I already made that have all sorts of fancy colors on them. You want to make sure that you have a place to share like what the schedule is for. I am a huge proponent of putting as many instructions as possible into my templates so that all users know exactly what they're supposed to do. They know what parameters are for. They know where they're supposed to go to find additional information. And so that's what this one, this schedule here is like that. And then telling people like what the parameters are doing and where they came from, so that you look at it, you immediately know without having to click on things. I hate having to click 5 clicks deep to figure out what something is, because the more clicks the user has to do, the less likely they are to actually do it, right? I've spent my entire career trying to help people be more efficient in Revit. Even like I started using Revit in 2008. The firm I worked at, it was like the second Revit project in the whole firm. They sent like 15 of us to Revit training and then stuck us all on the same project. We learned a lot. Me and a friend of mine, like she had learned it in grad school, so she knew a little bit of Revit already, and she and I just sort of embraced it and became, the model managers after only having used Revit for like 9 months. We were like, we care, we want to make sure this is efficient, and we just took it, and everyone else was fine to let us have it. No one else wanted it, so it was fine. But we really figured out a lot of these things to kind of help other people understand the workflows in the software, and this is the best way, right? Because the BIM managers of the world spend a lot of time. Their job is to make everybody else more efficient. And so if you can find a way to do that easy for everyone to access, then it's more likely that they're going to do the office standards that you've put together, right? The more it's just here, right? And that's why I like these working schedules. They're bright colors. You can put instructions in them. And then it also leaves the sheet ones as they are, so that your graphic standards for your company are maintained, right? Nobody's messing with any of the graphics of the sheet schedules. They're on the sheet already. They have the right columns. They're the right widths and everything. And all of the sort of work happens in the working schedule. And because of the magic of Revit, the information is in both. It's the same information, right? It's just shown a different way.
So I like that idea. So the working schedule then, if you did modify it dramatically, I guess you would have to manually modify the other one, right? So the data is going to be the same, but
Yeah.
technically the formatting, there's certain things that unfortunately we just can't tie together in
Yeah.
schedules the way, like, let's say a view template would be, right? So, but I like the idea. I think it's a
Yeah.
great idea. And it actually brings me to another question I think some people may be thinking about, which is, when it comes to things like column width, for example, right? The the very first thing you do when you're a Revit user and you're using schedules is you throw them on a sheet and then you start pushing and pulling and adjusting the column widths, right?
Yeah.
As someone who spent this much time, thinking about these things, is your
Yeah.
suggestion to actually format all of that in the schedule so that when you're dragging it on a sheet, it's looking good, right? And I want to bring that up
Yeah.
because I think that's an important part that is missed a lot when it comes to Revit training is things that seem simple like column width. If you can try and set that up in the schedule view, then when you drag it onto a sheet, it's going to hold, right?
For sure. Yeah. And actually, I can show that.
Yeah, sure.
That's a good point. So if you say like this column, I want to make it narrower, right? You could just go like this and drag it, but it's not very precise. And I know as architects, we're all probably type A and we want everything to like be the same. At least that's me. So
Right.
what you do instead is you select the column and then you go up here to columns and there's this nifty resize button.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to tell you what that width is. And you can just type in, like, let's say I want it to be 1/2 inch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just does it. Now, let's say, I'm going to undo that for a second. Let's say that, like, I have all of these columns and there's 8 of them, okay? And I want them all to be 1/2 inch. I can literally select all of the columns. So let's go like this, and there's 8 of them. I go to resize, and it tells me that it's 8 inches, and I want to make it 4. And then it's going to equally do all of them, right? It's like magic. Right? And so you can very precisely figure out what the overall width of your schedule, and I've done this for clients. They're like, the whole schedule needs to be 12 inches wide. Okay? So I make it 12 inches, and then I go back and I make each column kind of fit based on what type of information is going to be in that column. And I make it fit so that everything is a very deliberate width instead of this silly little drag it, because the dragging thing is not precise at all whatsoever.
And it doesn't even snap, I don't think, in the sheet view, right? When you drag, I don't think it snaps.
No, it doesn't snap to anything.
Yeah.
It just lets you drag it. And same thing in here, like you can just drag it, it's not the most efficient. So hopefully, I don't know if, I see a little bit in the chat about view templates.
Yeah, I was going to bring up, that was a good question from, who asked it, sorry. I want to make sure I give him credit because it's a good one. Oh, online for 2 hours is his name. So, okay, that's the username. I was hoping maybe there was a name there. Okay, so, the question is about view templates and does it hold the width and stuff. So that's a great thing is sort of what within schedule, what can you templatize within schedule views?
Yeah, so when you go to make, so let's do this. Let's look at it just from the standpoint of like, view templates over here. If I go to schedules, okay, from my master, right, from view templates, and then I just switch it to see schedules, and you can see over here that these are the things that you can schedule. So unfortunately, you can't really schedule the width you can't view templatize the width of the columns. Right. Just the stuff that appears in those properties, those different property tabs, in your properties. So for the most part, if I'm going to make a view template, I will usually I might do something with appearance, because the appearance could be the fonts, right? Like if I want to see the grid lines, if I want to see the striped rows, if I want to see the title, the headers, and whatever the text styles are for those, that I can put in, which is actually really nice. So what I discovered when I was putting this presentation together is I pulled schedules from a whole bunch of different templates and other things that I've been working on, and they all had different text styles based on whatever that company wanted their styles to be named, right? And so what I did is I made just a simple template that was just the appearance tab and had those styles, and I just applied it to them to quickly kind of clean up the text styles in those schedules that I brought in from all sorts of different places. So usually when I'm using a view template, I tend to only use it for this tab. Yeah. Because you don't usually have a whole bunch of schedules that are the same category where you want them to have the same formatting, right? I mean, usually there's one door schedule,
Right.
And in the newer versions of Revit, they now made it possible to split a schedule so that you no longer, like, if you have a schedule that's too long, right? In the past, you had to say, okay, well, for my room schedule, it's too long, so I want to have all the first floor rooms on one schedule and the second floor and third floor and so on. You used to have to do a filter and filter it for level equals first floor, and then you put that one on. Then you have a second schedule that was second. You don't have to do that anymore, because now you can, as soon as you go into your schedule, right, and you slice it like this, it actually turns it into two different schedules. So let me do it with this one so you can see it. So if I split this, right, now if you go over here, pull this out, you can see it. It's now two separate little schedules, and you can put them on different sheets.
Yeah,
so you know
awesome.
That was like, I had to take out of my hand. I was like, you don't have to do this anymore.
Oh, yeah.
You can literally just split it and then put each one on a different sheet. So I could remove this one from this sheet, right? I could just click on it and delete it and then put it on a different sheet. So they made that much easier. So you no longer have to do the silly, like, filtering thing.
Yep.
So,
I'll also add, for me, the only time I've ever even used templates for schedules when I have a project that has a lot of design options or a lot of phases. Then it makes it just easier to group and hit that, because if you've got one design option as one thing, because then you can assign it. But if you've got different variations of the design options, it makes it super easy to be able to just have all of those selected within that template and then just use that to apply it. But Sean mentioned that Sean Page mentioned that if you create a template from a current schedule, it holds the column widths. I think I see what he's saying, but the problem with that is if you make a schedule that doesn't have the same columns or properties, I don't think it matters, I believe. So I'm not really sure if that's the case, but
yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah, let's keep going. This is awesome. No, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm just reading through. If there's any questions, I'll go through. It looks like there's a few coming in.
Okay.
Somebody mentioned FF&E schedules. Any hot tips for that? But I feel like maybe we should hit a couple other more 101 stuff before we hit FF&E schedules.
Yeah. So let me go into a couple more things. So we talked about changing the column width. We talked about adding color. One thing I do want to talk about before we move into that more specific is some stuff with the header, because I think you saw that schedule where I had all these different rows and columns in the header, and you'd be like, oh, how did you do that? Now, this I actually discovered. I had one of my clients that I had when I was a consultant in the U.S. I went to the office one day, and she was like, look what I found. And she had found a way online to add additional rows and columns to the header. And me and the BIM manager were both like, wait a second, hold up. Like, what did you just do? And we're like, okay, wait, this is really cool, but before you do it anymore, let us make sure it doesn't break anything, right? So I went into some research, and I found out that it doesn't break anything. So we're like, cool. And so then I started using it. And this was like 2018, 19 that we discovered this. So basically, all you do is you go up here and you click in the title, not the header, but the title. And then up here, you can insert a row. So if you go insert row, oh, sorry, that's not there. Sorry, insert here. Insert, and it's above or below. So it's click here, make sure I'm here. And it's just going to add a row, make this a little smaller, like that, underneath, right? And then if you want to, you can like take, these, and if you want to merge them together, you just kind of click and drag, and then there's this merge unmerge button up here, like that, and you can add that information. And then what you can do is say this is like, you name it here. You can go up here and you can change the font. So if you click in this cell and you go to font, you can change this to maybe something bigger, and if you want it to be bold, you can do that. And then you can go into this row, and let's say I want like this cell to be a color. I can go shading, I can make it a color, and then I can also go to font, and I could, make it pink if I wanted, and bold. It's really, right. But anyway, you see what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can add text in here. the thing you have to be careful of is if you add more columns into your schedule, it's going to like mess up where these are. So this is not very smart. I'm going to warn you right now that it is not a very smart feature. If you're going to use it for real to put something on a sheet, you want it to be something that is not going to change. So, for example, I've actually used what we call I call it a title schedule for if I need to just make like a little chart that goes on a cover sheet that just shows like some basic information, and I don't want to really do a dummy key schedule because I really hate those. I will make a schedule for something that I'm not using at all. I like to do fabrication ducts. Nobody uses fabrication ducts. And then you don't have anything in the rest of the schedule. You turn off the headers and you just can format the title. And you can put that on your sheet. But again, if you need to adjust it per project, I wouldn't do it. I would only do it for something where there's like a little table and maybe it's like the code information or like something else like that where it's people need to go in and fill specific things and you want them to know, okay, you need to fill in these 10 things, then you can do that. I have done that for some time, but it's a cool feature that you can, use. You just have to, with anything in Revit, right? You just have to understand how it works. You have to make sure that your users understand how it works, and you don't want to put something in that they could too easily break.
Right. I could see people just throwing in rows and just like building their own Excel schedules that have no relationship to the models when they do that. Before we move on, Kelly had a good question, which was on the when you broke apart the schedule and showing in 23 how it makes now the two separate schedules. Sort of, how do you bring that back if you want it to be one schedule now?
Oh yeah, okay. So basically, if you just like drag it back, it's the same way as before, right? So if you select this one and then you click that little move and you just sort of make it touch.
I wasn't showing it. Do it one more time. I forgot to share it with everybody. One more time.
Yeah. So you select the piece, right? And then you'll see that little move icon right there, and you just click on it and drag it until it touches, and then let go, and it will merge back together. And
if you guys didn't notice, in the browser, it actually removes that those two schedules now. So although I guess if you put them on two sheets, then is that
I think you would probably lose it. So if I took this one off this sheet and I put it on a different sheet. This is fun. I never noticed.
I know. I never know. I was literally just gonna say the same thing. It shows a half square. That's pretty. So if there's 8 of them, is it gonna show like an eighth of a square? Or is it only showing half a square?
Oh. Let's see. Wait, this is fun. No, it's still just half.
Yeah.
But,
if you have them, if you have it on two sheets now and you wanted to remerge it.
Yeah. So I guess like if I had this one on this sheet too, right, and then if I did this.
It'll take it off the other sheet.
Sheet.
And that may be kind of where Kelly was getting at. It's kind of goofy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I see some fun questions in the chat. And some of the answers to your questions are in my handout, which Jeff will give you a link to afterwards.
Yes.
So you're welcome to have it.
100%.
Good 65 pages worth of stuff.
There were two questions about character-specific stuff, so I guess maybe we could talk about that, which is one about showing a dot and the other one about showing character of a specific component. So I'm assuming. I think what Joe Buchek is asking there is if you were to make a schedule like maybe a light fixture schedule where you show like a square with an X and then like a troffer and then maybe something like that, like a graphic type of schedule. And then it looks like DH Designs is asking about adding dots, which dots is a funny one that I went and we'll get into it first. I could tell a funny story about dots, but first go through your thing.
Well, let's start with the dot one because that's a relatively straightforward one. Okay. So this is my list. This is usually where I've seen people want to have a dot, right? There's a revision, or I'm including it or not including it or whatever. So you have a parameter that's a yes/no parameter for the revision, right? Now Revit does that silly thing where if it's a checkbox, then you look at it on your sheet, it says yes, right?
Yep.
It's super annoying. It's not what I want to see. I want to see a little dot. Okay, so in my working schedule, again, this is a beautiful use of a working schedule, right? I have all of these colors. I have all these different things that tell you what things are for. So my purple ones are the checkboxes that are a project parameter that go with my sheets. And then this is just a calculated value. So let's go take a look at that calculated value. I'm going to go here. I'm just going to edit it. All right. So all you do is it's just a simple if statement, right? If revision 1, so if it's yes, you just take a special character from your character map, whatever special character you want to use, and you put it in there. And because it's text, you have to put it in quotes so that it knows that it's supposed to display it, a little box. Otherwise, you just put 2 quotes and blank. That's it. It's literally that easy. And so I'll show you. So if we come here now, right, if I check the box, it just adds the dot. And if I uncheck the box, it takes the dot away.
Yep.
So
that's, yeah. And that's a great example of the working schedule, because what you're doing there is you're creating a sacrificial column almost that really has the data, and then you're using the if statement to show what. And so the funny story I had was it was initially Revit for a while it didn't support special characters in a schedule for quite some time, and when we made the move to Revit back in 11 or 10 or whenever I joined this bigger firm, that was like an end all be all for them, was not having dots on the door schedule. They had 2 hour and dots, and they had all this, and so we battled for a very long time, and I think we eventually got them to agree to just put Ys in the schedule until we finally were able to do dots. And so it's a funny story, because then a few years later they finally let us use special characters, but I couldn't believe that you couldn't just use special characters even then. Not that I necessarily agreed that we needed the dots, but whatever.
I can't remember. I mean, I guess if you could do bullets, right, in a text box, then theoretically you should be able to do a special. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I guess
it did. I know it for sure didn't support it whenever that was, because it was extremely frustrating. Because anyone at that time was looking for an excuse not to use it, and so so that was their excuse not to use Revit. So I don't know.
But the one,
Go ahead.
But one important thing I do want to mention about this, though, is that because it's a calculated value parameter, right, it's schedule specific. So this is where you need to be very deliberate about making your schedule. So usually what I do is I make my working schedule and I add literally every column that I think I might want, right? Then I'll duplicate it and then delete the things I don't want and take away the colors or hide them, whatever. So in the sheet version of this, all of these are hidden, these are hidden, these purple ones are hidden. You don't want to delete them. You need to hide them, because the formula is stops that. You want to make sure you hide it.
That's a great point. It has to be there, else your formula will break. That's a great point.
And that's the reason I make them colors, is then you need to hide them, right?
Got it. Yep.
And so that is one dilemma you have to think about, is that if you make your working schedule and you make your sheet schedule and then you add a calculated value parameter, you either have to add it in both places, or you have to make a new sheet version and clean up the graphics. And that, which you choose to do, is really going to depend on the magnitude of the changes that you need to make to your schedule, right? So if it's one thing and it's faster to just make that parameter in both places, do that. But if you added, say you have 12 revisions and you added 12 of them, it might be faster to add them in your working one and then just duplicate it and change the colors, and then not have to remake all of those parameters. So it's really going to be six, half dozen, depending on a lot of things, right? Your own personal skill, like how fast you are doing this, and how much, and how much reformatting you would have to do and that sort of thing. So that's just one of those, it depends situations.
And the working schedule, this is kind of DH Designs had a question about where it lives.
Yeah.
Do you have a working schedule sheet too, or you just keep it in the schedule view typically?
No, I just keep it in the schedule view. So this particular project browser is set up based off of the presentation. So things are grouped, by the different views. But what I usually do is in my project browser, I'll have 3 sections of schedules. So in, I don't know, was it 19 or 20, they added the ability to do your own browser organization for schedules, right? And so I'll have three. I'll have project info ones, which I actually do want to talk about. I'll have my working ones, and then I'll have my sheet ones. And then that way they all kind of stay together. And so it's just done with a custom parameter that I like to call schedule group. I have a group one, I have a sheet group one, and I have a schedule group one. And I make them separate just so that everybody knows what they're for. I mean, you could make it one and then assign it to all of them, but for me, it's just easier to call it that thing, right? So that's this parameter right here, schedule group. And so I just will do those three typically. And I put numbers at the front so that it orders the way that I want, right? But to circle back to the project info ones, it's really nice to have just schedules of the things in your model. So you could just do like a wall schedule. That way you know which walls are used in your project, right? You could just do a level schedule to see the levels and see what elevations are at. You could do a grid schedule. Just any schedules are there to tell you about that I in your model, that information, right? So you can't have too many. You honestly can't. As long as you're sorting them and grouping them properly, I don't think that it's an issue. And so I always put those, I always have this project info set of schedules that are just there. And it's usually just for the model manager or, you know, whoever is managing the models to deal with. But it's good to have that in there.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a great tip on grouping, using grouping parameters to organize them, because like you said, that wasn't there forever, and now that it is, it's super valuable, because usually then we'd fall back to our prefix and suffix and trying to just make it work graphically for our eyeballs, but being able to folderize them like this in the browser is awesome. Before we jump into something though, I did want to, because I think it's a cool feature that I don't think a lot of people know about, which is just the combined parameters, or combined properties, or combined parameters, or combined properties. Okay. So maybe just quickly show a quick example of that, because I know that's something that when I show people, they're like, "Oh crap, I didn't even know that was there." And so maybe just an example of where that can be used.
Yeah. So the place that I use it the most is actually with door dimensions, because sometimes you might want to have the width, the height, and the thickness like all together in one cell, right? So I have that here in this schedule. Actually, let's make a new one real quick. So I think it'll be a little bit easier.
Rick actually just said schedules are a great selection tool as well. It's a good point. When you have those project information ones, like rooms and stuff, then you could select in the project information ones, then say select in model. That's super valuable too.
For sure, yeah. Okay, so I have this schedule, right? Door number, make it really simple. I'm going to go in here, and this little button, this bottom one of these four, is the combined parameter. So you click on that, and then over here you get a list of all of the parameters that you have. So let's say I wanted to do the width first, so I'm going to add the width, and then I'm going to add the height, and then I'm going to add the thickness. Okay, so these are parameters. This is the separator in between. So let's say I want it to be an X, right? Now, down here, it's going to show you what it's going to look like. Actually, we don't need one there. That's at the end. So if you want to have a space, you actually have to put like a space in here. It's a little bit hooky, right? And you can see down here at the bottom, this is what it's going to look like down there. And then you just say OK, and it adds that here as that shared parameter, and then, or that combined parameter, and then it puts it there, right? You can schedule, you can center it if you want. Now, one thing I do want you to notice, though, is that curtain panels do not report thickness. So if you look down at this one's a curtain panel door, so it does not report the thickness.
Curtain panel doors have their own. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with those.
Curtain in general have their own issues.
Yeah, but they're also the coolest things ever. So I don't know. Awesome. No, that was great. I appreciate you doing that, because I just think that's something that when I was reading through the handout, it's one of those things that I thought about as something I just don't think a lot of people even realize exists. So I appreciate that. So I think maybe to take it to the next step, I think we can head back to, I forgot who asked the question about graphics. Joe, I think, did. But I think it could probably work its way into a conversation about the FF&E schedule too, maybe. As far as how that works. So maybe riff on that a little bit. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So this is adding images to your schedules. So there are two different ways that you can add an image into your schedule. All right. So the image can either live in the family itself, or the image can live in your project. Which you choose to do is really up to you. If it lives in the family, it's going to make the family bigger. If it lives in your project, you have to manage images in your project. So I'm not going to tell you that one is better than the other. It's really going to be that you have to think about your workflow and which one makes the most sense for you, right? So this is the one where the images live inside of the family. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, let's find one of these babies. Okay, so I have this lovely little workstation. And so in this family, when I go into the types, okay, there is a parameter under identity data called type image, okay? And this is just a little PNG. I like to use the PNGs because they're small and they're easy to kind of deal with. And you just, browse to wherever it is, you find it, you add it in. Okay, now this is a type specific thing. So you can put a different image for each type if you want. I'll leave that up to you as to what you think you need to do. But it is a type parameter, so you can make it different for each type. So you put it in here, right? And now it lives in the family. So you don't have to manage it in your project. It's just in the family. If you put that family in a different project, it's there already, right? So that's kind of the pro of that, is that it's kind of in there. To me, the biggest con is the family size. But, as long as you keep the image small, think about how big it's going to be on your page and size it appropriately. So don't make it like a 5 meg image. Like 200 or 300K is probably fine for this tiny little thing, that's going to be on your drawing.
And once that image, because I know the question's going to come up, I'm going to ask it anyways.
Yeah.
Once that image, when you do this method through the family, once that image is loaded into the family and saved, do you have to worry about absolute location of it for referencing? So if you sent the family to me, is the image there?
But I think that it's embedded in the family.
Yeah, so the audio cut out for a second there, Purvi, but I heard you a little bit. So Purvi was basically saying yes, it should get baked into the family as far as we know, and that's I want to bring that up because I think that's a good thing, because usually one of the bigger issues with images in Revit is figuring out, making sure that you don't lose it when you're sharing it between computers with paths. So.
That's a good point, and I actually haven't checked that one. We need to go back to verify if that's the case. Because I think, in general, right, families are self-contained objects. So once you put it in your project, you don't really see, where it's from. I could go but I'm not sure. But that's not all I think it's still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, right. And what I was going to say in the very beginning when you started talking about images is just in general, images suck when you work with them in Revit. So just be ready for that. But I think I'm losing your audio though. So Purvi, maybe disconnect or reconnect the mic or something. It just sounds distant all of a sudden. Or maybe like switch the audio in the mic and then switch back. Maybe let's see what that does. I don't know if everyone else is losing it or if it's just me, but. But I guess while you're doing that, I think in general you're probably better off hosting those images in a shareable location for for project users no matter what, just as a rule of thumb, right? I would imagine just in case it does come down to it and you get a whole bunch of missing image errors. No, now it's gone completely.
Okay.
There it is. Coming back now.
Is that better?
That's
okay.
better, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Now I hear you again. Wait.
Can
Microphone.
Nope, now you're gone again. Oh, I think you're back now.
Okay.
There you are. You're back now.
Okay.
Maybe it's the computer. Yeah, maybe the headset went.
I think my headphones got mad.
It sounds like it. That's okay. No problem at all. But anyways, yeah, I think as we were chatting about, I think just with regardless of whether you're in project or family, I think it's a good rule of thumb to make sure that images are hosted, just like with materials, are hosted in somewhere where everyone in the project can get to them. That's probably the takeaway there.
For sure. Yeah. You can still hear me fine now, right? Just using my computer speaker now. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So that's if it's with the family, right? But you can also host it within your project. So actually, let me go back to this one. So when you go into your schedule and you're in the fields, this type image parameter is the one that comes from the family. So that is a type parameter. But if you want to put them in your project, then what you have to use is the parameter that's just called image. But the image parameter is an instance parameter. So you want to be careful about this, because if you go and you assign it to just one instance, right, and then your schedule is not itemized, it's not going to show the image. So when you go to add the image to the schedule, you typically want to have your schedule be not itemized. So I have this schedule where I'm not itemizing every instance. You can see that this is how many of each of these I have in the project, right? And so then when you click here and you choose the picture that you want, right, just make it the same one, it will apply it to all of the instances. So remember, the one in the project is an instance parameter versus the one in the family is a type parameter. So just things to think about. I mean, I lean more towards keeping it in the family just so it goes with it. But again, it's really going to depend on how you're using it and how you want to manage those images.
And I think something to note too is that the interesting thing about the image parameter is that it's available on a ton of categories, right? Out of the box, which is neat, and you don't have to go into each family, edit it, save it, load it back and all that stuff. But so then I think to roll back to Joseph's question, when it comes to something like, let's say, a reflected ceiling plan, where maybe you want to have a graphical schedule showing it, then you can use these same two methods, Joe, I would imagine, where you can have the image, the plan, RCP image, whatever it is that you're trying to make, either built into the family or have it. Either way, you need to have that image. It needs to exist. And then you could apply it to those families, and then you just make a schedule as you would.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool.
And you can have that little something. Yep. All right. Let's see. I know we have a lot of questions. I don't know how much more time. What are you thinking on time?
I mean,
we morning here for me. So.
You've got all day, right? Let's see where we're at in another 5-10 minutes or so. I'm looking through the questions now. But I think as I read through them, if there's anything else you just want to jump into, feel free. But I'm going to keep reading through these here.
I definitely. So like we've got over a lot of the basic stuff. I don't know if folks are interested in. I see one about conditional formatting, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. We can jump on that for a little bit.
Okay, so let's do that one, because I have this example that was super fun for me to make, and so I like to share it. So I had this interiors firm that I was working with that they didn't want to use Revit keynotes, but they wanted to have keyed notes, right? And so this is a generic annotation workflow. And so what this schedule is what's called a note block schedule, right? So just a quick background on note block schedules. So note block schedules are a schedule of generic annotation families, right? Generic annotation families are the ones that appear here under symbol, right? When you go to like place a symbol, those are kind of the things that show up.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of a generic annotation family is you can throw as many parameters in there as you want. And then when you bring it in your project, it doesn't actually add them to your project. So it's a great way of making what I like to call a smart dumb schedule, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can use it for keyed notes. You can use it. I use it for material schedule. Like it is my method for a material schedule is these generic annotation objects with a note block schedule. But I used it here in this particular example because this particular client had a set of standard notes that they wanted to be included in their template, but they wanted people to be able to say whether they actually wanted to use that note or not. Okay. So in this schedule, this generic annotation family has these little yes, no parameters built into it and not used in a standard, right? And so if the standard box is checked, it makes this keynote text green. So people know this is a standard note. You shouldn't change this. This should be the same on every single project. Okay. And then if you end up not needing to use the note and you check this little not used box, what it's going to do, and this is a type parameter, so you're going to get this little pop-up, right? It's going to change this to say not used. So in the schedule that goes on the sheet, you're going to see this text displayed parameter, right? And you're going to see the keynote value, and then all the rest of this stuff is hidden. Okay. Now, and the way that this coloring works, and I can go back a little bit more and talk about this family if people want, but the way that this works is basically, oh, I lost my properties. Things open at one time. Is if I go into my formatting, right, and I have the text displayed parameter, and I go here to conditional formatting. Basically, if it's not used equals yes, then it's going to change it to this color, right? So basically, you just pick the parameter up here. You pick like over here. Equal to and the value, and then you pick a color. And so that's how I have that one. And then the keynote text one just has the same thing, and it's green. So does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense to folks.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think, and yeah, so you know, the idea there is highlighting cells based on conditions, and so you guys do that for anything. I remember we had multiple plumbing fixture counts or something where we would, it would flag as red if it went above a certain value. That kind of stuff can all be done with conditional formatting.
Really cool. And I've done that for like room schedules where if I have a specific program and a specific room needs to be a specific size, that's what this schedule is. So over here, I can put in like a programmed square footage and then the actual square footage. And I can say that if this, value. Now, what you have to do is you actually have to make a separate calculated value parameter that like takes the program to the area and does a math and then says if it's greater than or less than 0, because you can't say if this parameter is bigger than this parameter or smaller than this parameter. It has to be a greater than or less than a 0. So that's like the weird rub in it with that particular one. But it can still be done.
Yep. And there is no greater than or equal to in Revit. So that's always fun, but
exactly.
Awesome. No, this is great. So I think maybe there's a good question that is probably a good one to end on, which Rick asked, which is what was your favorite schedule upgrade for the 23 release and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I got to remember what.
I know. I guess maybe if it's 22, if it was 22 point something or 23, just I would say maybe we can change it a little to like what was your favorite most recent schedule update.
Well, so when
you don't. You have a Word document. You don't of just schedule updates.
Well, okay. So I last gave this presentation in version 2019, and I was like, well, I don't remember like
That's awesome.
what is new. So I literally made a Word document because at my old firm, I was also in charge of like the what's new blogs.
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
already did it.
I can't believe looking at it. The first thing I see is I can't believe Zoom and Schedules was a feature in 19. I still can't believe that. It feels like it's always been there. I can't believe it wasn't there. I just can't believe it was there.
So yeah. So this is really, I have to say that like the filter by sheets, this has got to be my number one most favorite thing from 23, because now you don't have to use keynotes in Revit. You can use the generic annotation keynote workflow just fine. The problem before was that the schedule would show all of the notes in the whole project. You couldn't make it sheet specific. But now that every single schedule has that checkbox for filter by sheet, you know, you can do that if you want to. For better or for worse,
no, that's great. I think I mean,
on that one, but,
I have to
imagine
that anyone who's gone through the process of like trying to strike out notes because they didn't pertain to the sheet can can probably understand where the value is there. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, so that one. And then I would say like from 22, my favorite thing was the shared parameters and key schedules. Like
that's
hands
huge.
down.
Huge.
Like
yeah.
That was, I had done so many workarounds in templates for that issue. And now all of those are a moot point, which is great, you know, because I'm glad that it finally got updated. So yeah, this is the list.
That's awesome. You know, it was funny. I maybe you could share that list with me, and I can almost guarantee you that people would like to see this list. So I'll share it with the world too. That's awesome. No, that's great. That's cool. I think it's
actually was wrong. I picked that one, but yeah, this was when I was updating my presentations, and I was like, a lot changed. You gotta understand it. So
somebody just asked, actually, do you recommend annotation keynoting over the keynoting with text, basically the keynote file type of deal?
So
I had a feeling there was going to be someone that was going to hang on that. I knew it. And so I mean, we're Revit geeks. We knew. I just knew it.
I mean, I can give my the firm that I worked for 10 years. They always did keynotes. Even in AutoCAD, they did keynotes. And so when we moved over to Revit, it was like an easy thing to kind of jump over into. And they used to do it where the first two digits was like the CSI division two numbers, and then it was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from there. But it was nice because they kind of grouped them together, and then it made it so that you could make sure that you checked your specs, that you were actually specifying whatever you were writing a note for. So it was actually, I really liked it. Now, it was the only thing I knew, but I really liked that system. No, I've never seen anyone else do it except that firm. And I've made probably 20 templates, you know, in the past 7 years. And so I am a huge proponent of making things as smart as possible. But, and there's a huge but there, right, is that when you do that, everybody has to understand that that's how it's working, right? So I love element keynotes. I think that they're fantastic because that information lives in the keynote. So if I have a toilet and I want to tag my toilet that says provide toilet, I can make it an element keynote, and that way it's just in there, right? And I don't have to think about it. But I've heard project managers say, well, I want people to think about it. I'm like, okay, but if toilet on every single project is 2201, like, why do you need to think about it? Just make it part of the object and stop worrying about it and wasting my time. You know?
I agree.
As the production person, it was a waste of my time. But I do have to say that, like, I can see, you know, if you don't properly teach people like how to use them, then it can really mess up stuff, right? But it's not that hard. If you click on a keynote, it tells you over in the properties what type of keynote it is, right? So like it tells you whether it's an element, a material, or a user keynote. And if it's an element keynote and you need to change it and you're not sure if you want to change it everywhere, just delete it and put in a user keynote and be done with it, right? So but I personally love making things super smart, but you have to look at your team as a whole. You have to look at the workflow. You have to look at, and this is something I actually talked about. You have to look at how willing your users are to try and learn new things and try to go with the standard versus I want to get it done and go home.
Right.
So really, you know, how smart you make it really depends on the enthusiasm of your team to also be there with you and making it smart and efficient.
Yep.
and the support of those above you telling everybody you need to listen to the BIM manager, and they made these standards for us for a reason. And that is literally their job, is to make yours more efficient. So maybe you should listen to them. Anyway,
100%. No,
that's my BIM manager soapbox.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. So we will finish with one last question, because there's a good question that Chad just had. That's a quick one, and it's asking about how to make schedule headers vertical versus horizontal. So turning
yes.
the headers.
So if you go into the formatting tab, there's a button right here. So you just click on the field, and then you can change it to vertical right here. And it doesn't show here. But
I was just going to say that's probably my biggest pet peeve of that is it doesn't show it in the schedule. It's super annoying.
But it does show it here.
Yeah. That would be nice to see in the schedule.
It's a good question. I haven't used that one in a long time.
I remember, there's very specific schedules where people have been using that for a very long time, and cool. So hopefully, Chad, that helped you. Awesome. Well, I think this is a great place to end. I really appreciate you coming on, Purvi. This has been a super fun. I could tell just by the chat that it's been super valuable to people here live, and I'm sure anyone watching this in the future is going to be super valuable. So any final words before we wrap this thing up?
No, I mean, if anybody wants the handouts, I don't know, I can throw, if it's easy, I can just throw up like my website address on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'll put links. I'll definitely put links to it in the description below in YouTube, and then also on the blog there'll be links to it. So we'll definitely have access to the handout, to maybe make a PDF of your schedule updates, because that's pretty cool, the Word document there.
I can
I'm sure. I just feel like people are going to enjoy that.
It's just shiftedparadigmdesign.com is my website.
Awesome.
And then if you go there and then you go to resources, you'll see all of my handout. There's it's a link to a Google Drive folder, and you can get all the information for the 3 presentations that I did there.
Awesome. Well, Purvi, thank you so much.
There's a lot more in the handout that I didn't talk about.
Yeah, no, it's great. Definitely, I encourage you all to check out the handout, because it's great. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Maybe we'll have to have you come back and continue on with some scheduling stuff or whatnot in the next season, but we'll definitely be in touch. And everyone, thank you for joining us. Again, I'll put links to all the stuff that Purvi mentioned, including reaching out to her on Twitter, as well as her shiftedparadigmdesign.com resources below. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming on, Purvi.
Thanks.
Bye, and for everyone else, thank you for joining this week. Next week is actually episode 90, and it'll be the final one before the end of the year, and a little break. Got a returning guest that you guys all know and love. I'll keep it a secret for now. But make sure you guys tune in next week at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you enjoy this content. And also don't forget to head on over to community.bimafterdark.com. Check out the private community. Check out some of the videos. See if it's something that you'd be interested in joining. And with that, I want to bid you all adieu and have a wonderful weekend. And I'll talk to you guys soon.